to allow you to ask me questions. I got a couple of emails yesterday, I think, with some questions, and so I'm going to start with those in case you haven't already been primed. These questions come from Bernie, which once you hear the questions, you will not have needed that introduction for. Favorite type of cookie? I really love chocolate, so anything with chocolate is good. Although I will also eat oatmeal raisin, which is kind of a heresy in my family. But I am gluten-free, so I honestly don't eat a lot of cookies anymore. What flavor does she put in her coffee? I love coffee, but I don't really drink it because it upsets my stomach. But I would just use some kind of creamer. I don't even know what I would use right now. What is she best known for to bring to a potluck? Once it is not so ungodly hot outside, I will bake. I am a one-trick pony when it comes to potlucks. I have been making a chocolate truffle cake for years now, and it has never disappointed anyone. So that's what I will be making. Gluten-free pizza is okay, and you do not need to get vegan cheese. I do eat dairy and eggs. I don't eat a lot of dairy, but I will eat it. Coffee, tea, hot or cold, sweet or unsweet, or water. Mostly water. I will occasionally drink a coffee or a tea. Usually my hot beverage of choice is actually hot cocoa, spiked with a little bit of espresso powder. Does she clean dishes and take out the garbage? I will rinse dishes. I will probably not wash them because I have only found one dishwashing liquid that I'm not actually allergic to. And I will take out the trash. I had that experience several times while I was at Tarpon Springs. When is her birthday? There's a lot of questions. When is her birthday? It is December 20th. I was supposed to be born on Christmas, and it's a whole story, but my mother had me induced, and I came on the 20th. Does she like a big party or something more understated? Yes. How can we modify our schedule to accommodate Reverend Kristina? I'm not entirely sure yet, but I will hold that. What is her cat's name? How old? Favorite food and favorite litter? 2 cats, 2 tuxedos. William and Gemma. William is about 3. He's a black long-haired tuxedo, and Gemma is about 1.5 years, and she is a gray short-haired tuxedo. Their favorite food is whatever I put out for them. They will eat just about anything, but they're really big on, eating. Favorite litter, we've only ever had one, Sweet Scoop. We've been using it for years and years, which is made from wheat byproducts. And I got it because it's eco-friendly. Does she give hugs? Yes, I will give hugs, but I will not initiate them. But if you want to get a hug, you can initiate that, and I will hug you. How many teeth does she have, and how many does she use? The answer is all of them to both. And there were also questions from Susan. I'd like to know if we have a chance of building a program for children, knowing our demographics, and my answer is I certainly hope so. I would love to see that as a possibility for the future in the congregation, and I would like to keep in conversation with people and figuring out how we might try to make that happen. And the last question that I was sent in advance. I'm also curious about our reach for diverse populations in our area. Seems to me some of our stumbling blocks aren't so much our racial differences, but our religious differences. It's like we get stuck when they understand that we are open to Jesus, but we're not where they are. I felt people leaving my table when they learned I was a UU, like I was a heathen. Actually, I have felt this quite a bit in Lake County. As we see, interfaith tends to not be valued or appreciated. They don't get it at all, but they just stay away and see us as heathens anyway. This might be something for later. Well, I will say that TriUU asked me some sort of related questions this morning. I guess as a minister, I don't get treated as a heathen right away, just because I'm a minister and might be wearing a clerical collar, but I will wear a clerical collar that has a Progress Pride flag on it, so that in and of itself is pretty much an indicator of who I am and where I am theologically in some ways. But yeah, I mean, it's not an uncommon experience, and I don't know exactly what it's like here because I've lived here for a month. But one of the things that I shared this morning at Tri-UU is that when I was in chaplaincy, in different settings, completely different settings, with people who were just much more conservative and Christian than I am. I'm not Christian at all. I'm a non-theist. I don't believe in God. I certainly don't believe that Jesus is our Savior. But they struggled with me because I was kind. And I treated people the way that they thought that Christians should treat people. And I just wanted to help people without trying to save them. And they struggled with how to make sense of that, and how I could be good at my job even though I did not believe in God. And so I think that there's something to be said in just continuing to show up as who we are and do what we do and trust that the people who are interested in what we have and possibly exploring another way of being will hopefully open their hearts. Now it will be time for the rest of you to ask questions and give Bernie a chance to get that mic around. Or if you want to shout it out for now, and I will repeat it back into the mic, Terry.
What are your favorite topics that you would like to be talking about in the sermons?
Yes. What are my favorite topics to be talking about in sermons? Yes. I talk about everything. So one thing, I really like using worship themes, and I've been using Soul Matters themes just for the themes, not having to come up with my own is in and of itself kind of a blessing. But I've never really used their materials. Anyway, I was talking with some people, I think in both congregations now, who have mentioned that the congregation has only recently gotten to be a little bit familiar with the values that were passed at General Assembly this last year. And last year's themes that Soul Matters put out were mostly related to the values. And so this year I'll be spending time digging into some of those values a little bit more so that everybody has a little bit more confidence about what they are and where they come from. If you have not heard yet, there's the amazing mnemonic that somebody came up with as Jet Pig, so that you can remember the 6 values, or it could be Jet L Pig. So it's justice, equity, transformation, liberating, love, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity. So I will be preaching on that, but I will be using a lot of different lenses. They asked me this morning, they're like, how do you decide what you preach on? And I'm like, this just goes and it comes up with stuff. Sometimes I preach on books that I've read, sometimes I preach on shows that I've watched or movies that I've seen, or something comes up in a conversation, or something happens in the congregation, and I'm like, oh, we need to talk about that. So it just depends. I take my inspiration from everywhere. Got one up front here. Thank you.
Before I ask my question, could you tell us how you found preaching twice?
It's interesting. People always ask me that question. My home congregation had 2 services, so for me, it was just kind of like, oh, I'm back to 2 services on Sunday mornings. It's not a thing.
What are your expectations of the congregation as a whole and individually, in terms of like attendance, committee work, going to events arranged by the committee, using UUA or going to the conference?
So my expectation is that people will do what they are called to do, that they show up if they feel called to show up, and whether that's here or if it's on Zoom, then whatever is fine. In terms of committee work, committees is a whole conversation. I know that the other congregation has said, and this congregation has said too, we're struggling with volunteerism. And I was like, congratulations, welcome to the 21st century. Everybody is struggling with volunteerism right now. What I would love to see is, and help, is making things a little bit more right-sized, streamlining things a little bit better. Assessing whether or not we actually need things, and including meetings at times. Sometimes meetings really could be an email, or a phone call, and what are our opportunities to change that? I'm trying to remember what all the other questions were. Using the UUA, I am really involved with what's going on at a national level. I in Tarpon Springs, in part because we started in the pandemic, so nobody was doing anything. But then also their social justice stuff imploded and then grew. So we're in the process of trying to figure out what to be connected with and how to be connected with those things. I think it's really important for congregations to do that work, and I've been on the job for a week and a half, I'm getting congregations still confused a lot, which will stop sooner than later. But I know that the other congregation trying to is having a lot of trouble feeling like they're not connected right now. So I'm happy to have conversations about what it might look like to take a different approach. I have opinions about a lot of things, as you may be gathering. And one of my opinions about doing social justice work is when it feels like, as liberals, one of the things that we struggle with is wanting to save the entire world all at once. And it's not really possible for us to do. And so what I've encouraged congregations in the past to do is pick one thing and focus on that and figure out how to grow from there
but to really just spend time being in a relationship with one particular thing. Hopefully that sort of answered your question. Okay.
Two-part question. Can you tell us what you learned in Tarpon Springs, and basically what you think is going on there, and tell us about the congregation there? Technology.
Tarpon Springs was kind of rough. So I came to them in the acute part of the pandemic in August of 2020. And we didn't start having service in person until October of 2021. So we spent the entire first year pretty much getting to know each other online, which is really challenging. And looking back, if I understood how long we were going to be doing that and everything, I probably would have done things differently, but we were just all kind of like tossed in this very rocky water trying to figure things out together. The congregation has a history of some real deep issues, including intense conflict avoidance. And so one of the things that was never in my contract and not what I was asked to do, but just desperately needed to be done, was to help them figure out what it meant to be a covenantal community and to be in relationship with each other, which means having conversations that aren't just like, oh, the weather's nice, or we should work on this project and give them money or whatever. Like having conversations about, hey, I don't agree with that, and here's why. And to actually be invested in not just that conversation, but the conversation that follows, which is, so how do we get from here to there? How can we get on the same page? So that was a lot of my work, was over the 4 years that I was with them, was getting them to a place where they could have really hard conversations together. And it was not perfect, and there was a lot of human involved, but they've gotten to a really good place, and I'm actually really proud of them in the way that they are open to the incoming minister there, and I'm just really grateful that they have done some really hard work that they had not signed up for, but I need to do anyway. That's everything.
Well, about the community. Tell us about the community.
So Tarpon Springs is an interesting place. I'm sure many of you know it's a deeply Greek area. Greek men initially were actually brought over to do diving in the sponges in the area around the coast, after the easy picking kinds of sponges had already been taken as much as possible. So there's a really strong, like they celebrate Greek Independence Day every year, and like it's really, there's tons of Greek restaurants. So it's kind of a conservative place, but also it's really beautiful. The Tarpon congregation's church is gorgeous. People are always like, when I was still there, they're like, how do you say that because it's your church? And I'm like, no, it's just gorgeous inside and out, really. They do a beautiful job taking care of the grounds. I think they blend in really well with the area of the city that they're in. Politically, it's an interesting place. They're dealing with trying to bring in more money, so usually development, but also the challenges of having more development. And yeah, is that helpful? If anybody wants to go over there sometime, it is worth a trip.
Are the paintings still in the building?
They absolutely are in the building. They were treated for termite damage early on in the pandemic, but they are all in the building, and the paintings, so the paintings were made to fit the windows of the church when the glass blew out from a tropical storm or tornado that came through in 1921. And they had 3 massive sinkholes under their 2 buildings. And while they were out of their buildings getting renovations for things related to the sinkholes, they were like, we're just gonna like get glass in the windows and all that kind of stuff. So if you've ever been there before, it probably was not as beautiful as it is now, because there's actually light coming in instead of it just looking like a tomb. How most people have described it.
Hi, I'm Henry Miller. This is a question about food.
Bernie's coming around.
A couple of food items, and I'm just curious about this. It's kind of personal, but there's the microphone. Okay, here we go. Food, you mentioned gluten-free, and you said you don't eat much dairy, but you eat a little bit of dairy. So I'm just curious, because there's a lot of food concerns about people in the world. Is that because there are kind of allergies to wheat, for example, and dairy, or other reasons?
I have lactose intolerance, so lots of lactose is not a good situation.
And I think I have to
relative food intolerance.
So that was why I did small amounts of it, really small amounts of it, but without any problem. I don't know that I have, anybody who has celiacs who's really sensitive. I'm not that kind of sensitive, but if I eat something more than a cookie, probably, I start to feel it in my body.
Hi. Can you talk about your family background, your life experience, and how and what's the reason for you to get in this type of work?
So I grew up unchurched. We went to Christmas Eve services at one of my grandparents' churches every year, and Easter we went to pretty much different churches every year, so I wasn't even getting consistent messaging about anything. In a home that was spiritual and religious free, even at my age as a minister with 4 parents, including my 2 steps, I cannot tell you theologically what any of them believe. So we didn't talk about stuff at all at home. So it's kind of left to my own devices, and for better or for worse. And I grew up in a very multicultural, multi-religious area, so I was exposed to a lot of people with different beliefs, even though the hardcore Christians, the conservative Christians were like, oh, they're going to hell. It was like, okay, maybe that works for you, but not so much for me. And just over the course of my life, I started having different experiences, and when I came back from Russia, I did a study abroad in Russia. I met someone who was in AA, and so I started going to meetings with him, and really started to understand for the first time the power and potential of being in a fellowship and a community. And it's that experience, those experiences really have informed some of my understanding of what it means to actually be in also a spiritual and religious community. And recognizing that that wasn't a place that I belonged, I started having a real strong calling inside to find a spiritual community. And someone that I met told me, you should really check out the Unitarian Universalists. They're your people. I know, my sister is a retired Unitarian Universalist minister, and so I eventually made my way to Unitarian Universalism, and October 1st is my 18-year anniversary of walking through the doors of my home congregation, and I've been here ever since. A few years after, probably about 4 or 5 years after I started attending the church, the whole time, people just kept asking me when I was going to seminary. And we have a lot of really active, involved lay people in my congregation. So for me, it was kind of like hard to discern if they actually felt like there was a calling for ministry for me, like in terms of professional ministry versus lay ministry. People are just asking me just repeatedly all the time. And finally I was like, oh, I think I'm supposed to go to seminary. And so I did, and it was probably not like the right time to go into seminary, but I went anyway because I couldn't not do it. And I graduated in 2016, and 8 years later, I'm here. One more.
Hi, I'm Russell Littlefield, and I'm really curious. I picked up on your comment that you're not a God leader, and so I'm really curious about your concept of worship. It's not a simple question, I know, but if you could just give us a hint.
So the root of the word worship is about honoring, respecting, lifting up that which has worth. And I was a DRE for a couple of years while I was in seminary. And so for me, the transition from the principles to the values was like, well, of course we're switching to the values. Because when I was doing children's and youth programming, we centered a lot of what we did on what our core values are in terms of through the lens of the principles to some degree, but a lot through just talking about values. So for me, that's what it is. It's about honoring those things that we believe, and through the lens of Unitarian Universalism. Although I'm not Christian, and although I am a non-theist, I will be preaching from the scripture from time to time. I do celebrate our traditional, both Jewish and Christian holidays especially. Those are the traditions that I am most familiar with. I've been learning about Christianity. While I was in seminary, I was like, I should probably learn some stuff about Christianity. So I have actually learned to celebrate Lent and Advent every year. Not part of my experience at all, but something that I've really come to enjoy. At Tri-UU this morning, they asked me what my favorite holidays were, and I was like, man, kind of like all of them, because they all have something to offer in a different way. So I'm really excited to get to share that. So hopefully that helps give you some idea, and you'll certainly hear more about it in the future. So I think that is more than all we have time for, but if you would please rise and lift your voice in song with me for our closing hymn, number 407, We're Gonna Sit at the Welcome Table. And I'm going to keep telling you the hymn numbers probably because I'm used to having to give out the hymn numbers.